Hey, you summoned a lesser maker. My bridge board is one of my favorite boards to play on. There is one weak side, and it's this tower that just isn't very playable. It's hard to get minis to fit in this. It's hard to get hands to fit in here. We can make this much more playable. It's time to rip this band-aid off. I went to the dollar store to look for kind of cool shapes for a wizard tower top, and I found these wine glasses that are just plastic. I've wanted to make a wizard tower for so long. This video was one of my first introductions to Mordheim in general, and honestly, it took me several watches to realize that Mordheim was a game, you could play it, and that it was free. I started out with a 4x5 inch base, and I made a bit of a foundation and set that aside to kind of harden up. After that, I take a rock and I heavily texture this so that when I stamp in my bricks or my cobblestones in this case, there's a lot of texture for these bricks to really feel individual and unique. You want to push a little harder than you think you should. I cut a 45-degree angle around each window and doorway, and then kind of made a swoop over the doorway to kind of act as an eave, and we'll be adding some more details there later, so that'll make a bit more sense. We're gonna make a stamp tool. I'm using the soft metal of a paintbrush, and we're cutting off the bristles. After that, I shove on a rock and kind of tamp it in with a hammer. That way it kind of makes an irregular shape, and I crimp it around the rock as well. And honestly, that's done. If you're making a brick version of this, all you have to do is take some pliers and form that shape into a rectangle or square. The last couple times I've made this, I've made a big one and a small one, and depending on my patience level, I kind of switch between the two of those. You can see how quick this goes. This is the fastest way to do stonework, in my opinion. There are other ways to do this. A lot of people like doing individual bricks, and I'm going to show that method. Honestly, this is so much faster, and later you'll see why I switched between the two. So this week we hit 3,900 subscribers, and I just want to take a sec to thank you guys for being such a great community. I really genuinely appreciate every comment. If you aren't a subscriber, help me get to 4,000. I've been really enjoying putting gargoyles on my builds. It's a really nice detail that kind of steals the show. This is a kit that I've made, and it's available on eBay. There's only I think 5 more of them. If you're interested, go check it out. I'm adding these timber beams for my second floor. I was watching World of Stonecraft's Instagram, and he's been doing this on several of his buildings where he adds a bit of a substructure and just like a little bit more detail. It doesn't take that much longer, but it's one of those things where final result is greater than the sum of its parts. I'm adding a balsa wood jut out on this side, and I carved in a window. For this whole level, I wanted it to be primarily made out of wood, using mostly balsa wood and some laser cut windows that I got from Temu. They're for like doll houses, but I think they look really good for like archways and kind of make this look like a big window or like a book nook or whatever. A wizard would use a book nook, I think. On this board, I don't have that many wood structures, and a lot of this building is going to be made out of stone. So I think having this as a different material is going to really help balance this out a bit. I'm constantly comparing this build to the board because I can plan this thing out as much as I want. It's going to kind of figure out and tell a story on its own. I wanted this tower to be really integrated into the cliff, and we haven't even built the tower yet. So what orientation the build is on this cliff as well. And I'm not assuming that I know the answer so far. I have an idea at this point, but I'm open to changing that idea as I start building. There's no right or wrong answers at this point. I'm just trying to do my best to make sure that this looks unique and is really playable. Because I was thinking about this, I wanted to kind of bulk up this side of the building. So I made some buttresses and I'm tacking these on just to kind of balance it out a bit more. I added a circular room to this third floor, and I used another one of those laser cut windows. It looked a little unfinished, so underneath this window, I added one of my frog goils, and I really love this guy. I think this one is my favorite from the kit. Because I added the foundation underneath this building, I wanted to kind of trim off the top of this just to even it out a bit. And I did that with a saw. It cuts through this stuff like butter, and it leaves enough tooth for adhesive to go on it as well. To make this structure of the tower, I'm going to use an extra wide tape roll and a styrofoam cup that I've cut into shape. This is when I think laying individual bricks is beneficial. It's when you kind of patchwork some structures that you want to add detail to. I could have carved this out of the pink foam. It would have been a little bit more difficult, but I feel like for simplicity's sake, it was easier to add a substructure and then add on top of it rather than the other way around. I also wanted to add some skull details to this because I noticed that in some previous Mordheim kits, this detail is pretty prevalent. So I grabbed some from the Dollar Tree, cut off the front half without the jaw, and just tacked it in and then added the stonework around it, and it looks pretty seamless. To start prepping this wine glass for the build, I started chipping around the edges to make it look a little bit more damaged and make sure that hands could fit in this area. And I sanded the entire thing just to make sure that paint would really adhere to it. With another tape roll and some clothespins, I finished up the structure for this side of the tower. I ended up adding a little bit more supports here just so it didn't look so flimsy. I realized that these two inverted buttresses would look really good with some gargoyles on top. So I dug out from my bits box and found these spare casts of, I think they were like panther heads or something. You could always go to the dollar store, get a pack of farm animals or zoo animals, and just cut off all the heads and then just tack them on. If you want other examples of this, in previous videos, I have a bunch where I give examples of this. So feel free to go back 1 or 2 videos for that. So this whole structure is kind of leaning on the tower, and it looks like it's shifting off of its foundation. So I went to get a kit that had these like wood support structures, and I wanted it to make it look like this wizard had staked the foundation to the ground to make sure that it stopped shifting anymore. So I'm tacking on all these support wood structures to kind of hint that this thing has been shifting off and it's sliding off, but this wizard is trying as hard as he can to make sure that it doesn't fall off its foundation. You kind of let the build inform how you're building it. I sculpted a cobblestone wall mold, and that's been my dump mold whenever I have extra resin from casting all these gargoyles. I've just been dumping the extra resin in this mold, and I used these to kind of blend together the unsightly gaps and edges. This ladder is an HO scale ladder, and this will help the models get up and down this structure. I don't really like having to use like the climbing rules for a structure that should be easily accessible. I had some extra time for this project, so I thought I would kit bash and paint a wizard. While I do that, I'm just going to thank my Patreon members real quick. It's only $2 a month if you'd like to help support the channel. That's 25 cents a video, and if you find value in the free STLs and the free templates I provide to you guys to help support your hobby, feel free to help support me. No pressure though. So thank you to Leroy Fetter, Caracol, Old School FRP, Burning Heart Custom Creations, James Anders Hanover, Grim Drunk, Treborius, Andy, Corey, Mike, Nick, The Lich's Laboratory, Cabu, The Pessimist, Seb, Lori, RC3D, John, Fabio Soroso, Doom Chupacabra, Sinister Grackle, Silver Fistion, C.J, The Enchanted Raven, What I Gotta Roll, Be Up One, Paul, Grombert, Frosty Spire, Arcadius Prime, Nick, Madzi Cryo, and Gonzalo. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. I genuinely appreciate it. It genuinely helps out that, and I can do like a really good build every week. So thank you for that. Now prepare yourself for the fastest shingles on YouTube. You're gonna get some self-adhesive cork and scallop scissors. I used 7mm scallops, and you're gonna just cut some strips out of, then you're going to separate each shingle or each scallop with some regular scissors. Then you just peel and stick it right onto the model. This adhesive isn't a permanent adhesive, but it is enough to tack it in place until you go over it with a black Mod Podge and seal everything together. This is by far the fastest way to do this. I didn't have that much to shingle, but it honestly only took like 15 minutes. Self-adhesive cork is available at the Dollar Tree, and you can find it cheap. I think it was like 80 cents at Joann's the other day. I decided to go with a dark brown Mod Podge coat instead of black, just to kind of help it at its grungiest. Like shadows, now they're like muddy, and I think that ended up helping me out in the end. For the stonework, I decided to go for a limestone again. I did this 2 episodes ago, and I wasn't quite sure on the method and how this looked, but you start off with a tan color, and then you do a bunch of washes later. For my wood, now that I'm doing it, I did kind of like a bluish brown, and I wanted to kind of make it look like it was an aged wood, so it was really oxidized. And they're really close in color, but the way I'm weathering them is way different. For the washes, I decided to put them inside of spray bottles. So I got some green paint and I watered it down in that spray bottle. And then I also got some brown paint and some black paint, mixed it together, and watered it down in that bottle as well. For my brass oxidation color, I went ahead and painted all the brass areas just with the green and let that dry. And then I'll go in with the washes and I'll do the gold a bit later. And I also painted the green shingles too. Now it was time to try out these new spray bottles. So I sprayed everywhere with this paint. What I kind of came to realize is that this method was a bit finicky, and I'm not sure I recommend it because the washes weren't really tinting the paint. It was more just kind of washing the paint off. And so that brown layer kind of saved my butt a bit because it gave it a little bit more dimension. So you're gonna have to take that on your own, maybe use a better quality paint than dollar store paint like I use. But I'm not sure I can quite recommend that method, just so you're aware. let's take a final look. All right, and that's it. So thank you guys so much for watching. I genuinely appreciate your support. Help me get to 4,000 subscribers. Make sure you leave a comment and a like. It goes such a long way to propel this video in front of new people and a wider audience. So in general, I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a good one.